In the ship's log of the sloop Ranger, dated 1718, the surgeon recorded the first signs of a spreading ailment among the crew. He noted lesions appearing on the faces and hands of several men after a month at sea. The entry was brief, written in a tight hand, and it did not name any individual. This log entry serves as a concrete anchor for understanding how venereal disease moved through pirate communities. The Ranger was a small, fast vessel, often used for raiding merchant ships in the Caribbean. Its crew numbered about 80 men, all living in a confined space below deck. The surgeon's role was to treat wounds and illnesses, yet he lacked specific tools for diagnosing syphilis. His observation marks the earliest documented concern about the illness on this particular ship. The Ranger frequently anchored at Nassau, a notorious haven for pirates in the Bahamas. Nassau's port was crowded with ships, taverns, and makeshift lodgings, where crews mingled freely. When a vessel returned from a successful raid, sailors often went ashore to spend their prize money. In these taverns, close contact with local women and with other sailors from different ships created opportunities for infection to spread. The humid climate of the Bahamas exacerbated skin conditions, making lesions harder to notice until they became painful. Surgeons on shore occasionally treated visible sores with rudimentary ointments, but they rarely connected the symptoms to a transmissible disease. Below deck, the Ranger's living quarters were divided into a gun room, a berth for the foremast crew, and a cramped space aft for the officers. Hammocks were slung close together, and men shared blankets and clothing without regular washing. When one sailor developed a chancre, the infectious fluid could contaminate shared linens or be transferred through direct contact during sleep. The surgeon noted that several men complained of soreness after sleeping in the same berth, yet they hesitated to reveal the source of their discomfort. This silence stemmed from fear of ridicule and from the stigma attached to ailments considered shameful. Transmission routes also extended beyond the ship's immediate crew. When pirates captured a merchant vessel, they often took aboard any useful goods and sometimes forced the captured sailors to join their ranks. If any of those prisoners carried the disease, they introduced it to the pirate band upon integration. Conversely, pirates who went ashore to sell plunder could bring back infections acquired in foreign ports. The Ranger's log mentions a stop at Port Royal, Jamaica, where the careened hull was cleaned and the crew allowed brief liberty. Surgeons from the Royal Navy stationed there occasionally treated pirate patients, though such encounters were rarely recorded in official reports. The initial response to the spreading ailment was marked by hesitation and informal remedies. The ship's surgeon applied mercury-based salves to the most visible sores, a practice borrowed from contemporary European medicine. He also advised affected men to avoid exertion and to keep the lesions dry, recommendations that offered little relief. Some crew members turned to folk remedies, rubbing tar or crushed herbs onto their skin, believing the strong smell would drive away the illness. These treatments varied in effectiveness and often caused painful side effects, yet they were pursued because formal medical guidance was absent. As weeks passed, the number of men showing symptoms increased, prompting quiet discussions among the quartermaster and the gunner. They worried that illness would weaken the crew's ability to man the guns during a chase. Despite these concerns, no formal order was issued to isolate the sick, partly because the pirate code emphasized unity, and partly because the exact nature of the disease remained poorly understood. The surgeon's later entries grew more urgent, describing worsening pain and the appearance of rash-like eruptions on the torso. He noted that some men became feverish and weak, reducing their effectiveness during night watches. The silence surrounding the ailment began to break when a particularly severe case led to a man's death after a prolonged fever. The death was entered into the log as lost to a lingering distemper, without specifying cause. This vague phrasing reflects the broader reluctance to name venereal disease openly, even in official ship records. Yet the accumulation of such entries over multiple voyages suggests that pirate crews were gradually confronting the reality of infection spreading through their ranks. The Ranger's log, therefore, offers a rare glimpse into the early awareness of syphilis among pirates, grounded in a specific vessel, a dated entry, and a named port, all of which provide the material detail required for a documentary account. A surgeon's journal from the year 1723, kept aboard the converted merchant vessel Adventure Galley, provides a stark record of improvised treatments for venereal disease at sea. The journal, preserved in the British Admiralty archives, documents the grim reality of mercury-based therapies administered to infected crew members during a prolonged cruise in the Caribbean. These entries reveal how pirates and privateers resorted to brutal remedies when conventional medicine failed to address the spread of syphilis across maritime communities. The Adventure Galley carried a cargo of mercury in sealed flasks intended for use in gold extraction operations along the Spanish Main. When crewmen began exhibiting symptoms consistent with the French disease, Captain Kidd's quartermaster authorized the surgeon to experiment with mercury as a treatment. The standard procedure involved heating mercury in a crucible to produce vapors, which patients inhaled for periods lasting up to 30 minutes. The surgeon recorded that men coughed violently during these sessions, their faces contorted in pain as the toxic fumes burned their lungs. Some patients vomited immediately after treatment, while others complained of severe headaches and dizziness. Topical applications of mercury proved equally harsh. The surgeon mixed elemental mercury with animal fat to create a paste, which he applied to open sores twice daily. Within hours, patients reported intense burning sensations at the application site. The mercury caused tissue necrosis, creating wounds that were often worse than the original infection. Several men developed secondary infections from the chemical burns, requiring additional treatment with poultices made from boiled rags and seawater. The surgeon noted that while some lesions did appear to heal faster, the overall condition of treated patients remained poor, with many experiencing weight loss and persistent weakness. Tar emerged as another common remedy, readily available from the ship's stores for waterproofing purposes. Crew members suffering from syphilitic sores would coat their bodies with heated pine tar, believing the sticky substance would draw out the disease. The treatment caused excruciating pain as the hot tar adhered to broken skin. Sweat and movement would cause the tar to pull away, taking pieces of damaged tissue with it. Some pirates reported temporary relief from itching, but the practice often led to severe skin irritation and secondary bacterial infections. The ship's carpenter, whose duties included maintaining the tar stores, observed that men who used tar treatments frequently developed festering wounds that required constant cleaning with salt water. Folk remedies proliferated among the crew, despite official disapproval from the ship's medical personnel. One popular treatment involved grinding powdered oyster shells into a fine dust and mixing it with rum for oral consumption. The theory, passed down through sailor tradition, held that the sharp particles would cut through the disease from within. Men who tried this remedy suffered severe stomach distress, with several vomiting blood after repeated doses. Another remedy called for applying the powdered remains of burned Bible pages to affected areas, based on the belief that sacred texts possessed healing properties. This treatment caused severe chemical burns and offered no therapeutic benefit. The surgeon's journal describes the administration of guayacum, a tropical wood imported from the Caribbean island of Hispaniola. This treatment involved boiling chunks of the hardwood to create a bitter tea, which patients drank in quantities of 1 pint 3 times daily. The remedy caused violent purging, with patients expelling large amounts of bile and mucus. While some men reported feeling temporarily stronger after treatment, the constant diarrhea led to dangerous dehydration, particularly problematic during long voyages when fresh water was scarce. The surgeon recorded that 3 crew members died from complications related to guayacum treatment, their bodies weakened beyond recovery by the aggressive purging protocol. Spanish lichen, harvested during raids on coastal settlements, represented another desperate measure employed by pirate crews. The surgeon mixed the dried fungus with honey to create a paste for topical application. Spanish records from the port of Havana, dated 1721, mention this practice among captured pirates, noting that the treatment caused severe allergic reactions in nearly half of those who tried it. The combination of foreign plant compounds and shipboard contaminants often resulted in spreading rashes and prolonged fever episodes. The Adventure Galley's surgeon ultimately concluded that none of these treatments provided reliable cures for syphilis. His final journal entry on this subject, dated August 1723, states bluntly that mercury killed more men than it saved, while alternative remedies merely prolonged suffering. He recommended immediate return to port for proper medical care, though such assistance was rarely available in the remote anchorages favored by pirate vessels. The harsh reality of maritime medicine during this period meant that infected crew members faced a grim prognosis regardless of treatment chosen. These historical records demonstrate how desperation drove sailors to endure brutal therapies in hopes of finding relief from one of the era's most feared diseases. The trial record of Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, contains a revealing passage concerning disease among his crew. During proceedings held in Nassau in 1718, a witness testified that several crew members had been dismissed from the ship after developing visible symptoms of illness. The witness, a former quartermaster, stated that the captain ordered the men ashore at Gun Key, a small island near Nassau, leaving them to fend for themselves. This document provides a concrete example of how stigma surrounding venereal disease influenced leadership decisions aboard pirate vessels during the Golden Age of Piracy. The Pirate Articles of Agreement, those written contracts that governed life aboard each vessel, rarely contained explicit provisions regarding sickness. However, the unwritten rules of pirate society carried significant weight. A man who displayed obvious signs of infection risked being labeled as weak or unclean, qualities that contradicted the image of strength and invincibility that pirate crews cultivated. The quartermaster, responsible for distributing shares of plunder, possessed considerable influence over crew morale and could quietly reduce the allocation given to an afflicted sailor. This informal punishment served as both a deterrent to reporting symptoms and a source of lingering resentment within the crew. Discipline aboard pirate ships depended heavily on reputation and perceived toughness. A captain who appeared weak or indecisive could lose command, sometimes violently. When disease threatened to incapacitate multiple crew members, leaders faced difficult choices. The captain of the sloop Margaret, operating out of Nassau in 1720, ordered 2 infected sailors to be marooned on a deserted quay after they refused to keep their symptoms hidden. The incident was recorded in a letter from the governor of the Bahamas to the Board of Trade, dated June of that year. The letter described the men's fate as harsh, but noted that such measures were not uncommon when crews feared contagion would undermine their fighting capacity. The silence surrounding symptoms created dangerous complications for shipboard operations. Men who concealed their condition continued performing strenuous duties, including manning the guns during engagements with merchant vessels or Royal Navy ships. The physical exertion exacerbated their symptoms, leading to sudden collapses at critical moments. A report from the Royal Navy frigate HMS Rose, dated 1719, described capturing a pirate sloop, whose crew included several men too weak to resist effectively. The captured pirates later revealed that at least 3 of their number had been suffering from advanced stages of the disease for weeks, but had hidden their condition out of fear. Secrecy extended beyond the individual sailor to affect entire sections of the crew. When a group of men from the same watch developed symptoms, they often agreed among themselves to say nothing. This collective silence made it difficult for the surgeon to identify the source of infection or track its spread. The carpenter aboard the brigantine Revenge recorded in his personal log that 7 men from the starboard watch had simultaneously requested sick leave in 1721, prompting suspicion that they were concealing a shared ailment. His entry, though brief, illustrates how awareness of the disease's transmission had begun to spread among maritime communities. Leadership responses varied considerably, depending on the captain's temperament and the crew's composition. Some commanders, like Henry Jennings, who operated from Nassau during the 1720s, attempted to isolate affected men in the forecastle, away from the main berthing areas. This measure, while logical from a medical perspective, proved difficult to enforce in the close quarters of a small vessel. Other captains chose to ignore the problem entirely, hoping it would resolve itself or simply accepting the losses as an inevitable cost of seafaring life. The stigma attached to venereal disease also shaped interactions between pirates and the communities they raided. When crews went ashore to demand supplies or negotiate for water and provisions, they risked exposure to further infection through contact with local inhabitants. Some towns, aware of this risk, imposed quarantine measures on visiting sailors. The port of Charleston, South Carolina, implemented a mandatory health inspection for all incoming vessels in 1723, a policy that pirates circumvented by anchoring offshore and sending smaller boats to shore. These adaptations demonstrated how the fear of disease detection influenced tactical decisions beyond the immediate confines of the ship. The tension between maintaining a tough exterior and addressing genuine medical needs created lasting psychological effects on pirate crews. Men who watched companions suffer in silence, unable to seek help without jeopardizing their standing, developed deep mistrust of their shipmates. This atmosphere of suspicion undermined the communal bonds that pirates relied upon for survival. The governor's report from Nassau in 1724 noted that several crews had fractured due to disputes over how to handle sick members, with factions forming between those who advocated for compassion and those who insisted on harsh measures. These internal divisions, rooted in the stigma surrounding venereal disease, contributed to the eventual decline of organized piracy in the Caribbean. A report from the Royal Navy's Board of Health, published in 1735, documented how the experiences of pirate crews with venereal disease influenced naval medical practices in the decades that followed. This official document, preserved in the archives of the British Admiralty, reveals that the harsh lessons learned in the lawless waters of the Caribbean gradually shaped more formal approaches to disease prevention aboard naval vessels. The report serves as a historical bridge between the informal, often brutal methods employed by pirates and the systematic medical protocols that would later become standard in maritime medicine. The Royal Navy had long struggled with maintaining the health of its crews, particularly during lengthy voyages, when fresh provisions ran low and sanitation deteriorated. By the 1740s, naval administrators began incorporating elements of pirate quarantine practices into their regulations. The frigate HMS Victory, launched in 1765, included isolation compartments specifically designed to separate sailors showing signs of contagious illness. These innovations were directly inspired by reports from naval surgeons who had observed pirate ships implementing similar measures, despite their limited resources. The Victory's design included a sick bay that could accommodate up to 12 patients at once, a significant improvement over the makeshift infirmities previously used. The experience of pirate surgeons with mercury treatments contributed to a more nuanced understanding of syphilis progression. While the Royal Navy continued to use mercury-based therapies into the 19th century, naval medical texts began, including detailed accounts of dosage limitations and side effects. The Naval Surgeon's Manual of 1782, authored by Dr. Robert Hamilton, contained a section titled Observations on the Mercury Treatment of Pox, which acknowledged that excessive dosage could cause more harm than benefit. This cautious approach had roots in the documented experiences of pirate crews who had suffered severe mercury poisoning under unregulated treatment protocols. Port authorities in Atlantic trading hubs took note of the disease control measures developed in pirate communities. The port of Havana, Cuba, established the first formal maritime health inspection system in the Americas in 1768. This system required incoming vessels to present documentation of crew health and undergo inspection for signs of infection before docking. The regulations were particularly strict for vessels arriving from Caribbean ports known for pirate activity, reflecting the recognition that these ships had developed practical approaches to disease containment that were worth adopting. The Havana regulations became a model for other ports throughout the Caribbean and eventually influenced international maritime health codes. The knowledge of folk remedies used by pirates found its way into naval medical texts, though often with significant modifications. The Spanish lichen treatment, previously administered without standardization, was refined by naval physicians into a more controlled protocol. The Naval Hospital in Charleston, South Carolina, documented successful cases of using standardized Spanish lichen extracts in 1775, though it noted that the treatment required precise preparation to avoid the severe allergic reactions common among pirate practitioners. This integration of traditional knowledge with scientific methodology represents one of the lasting contributions of pirate medical experience to formal naval medicine. The stigma surrounding venereal disease that had characterized pirate communities evolved into more formal approaches to medical privacy and naval service. The Articles of War established in 1751 included provisions for medical confidentiality, recognizing that fear of social ostracism could prevent sailors from seeking necessary treatment. This represented a significant departure from earlier naval practices, where illness had been publicly disclosed as a matter of record. The shift reflected an understanding that the secrecy surrounding disease, while problematic in pirate contexts, had contained kernels of wisdom about the importance of privacy in medical matters. The experience of pirate crews with disease outbreaks influenced the development of naval vaccination programs. By the 1790s, the Royal Navy had begun implementing smallpox vaccination for all sailors, drawing on earlier observations that survivors of the disease appeared to have immunity. The vaccination protocols, established at naval hospitals in places like Port Royal, Jamaica, incorporated lessons from pirate communities about disease resistance and immunity. The surgeon at Port Royal reported in 1798 that vaccinated sailors showed better outcomes during disease outbreaks, a finding that helped establish vaccination as a standard naval practice. The maritime health regulations established in the early 19th century reflected the accumulated wisdom from decades of pirate experiences with disease management. The International Maritime Health Code of 1823, which established uniform quarantine procedures and health inspections for commercial vessels, contained numerous provisions that had their origins in practical pirate adaptations. These included requirements for separate latrine areas on ships, ventilation systems, to reduce humidity below decks, and regular inspection of crew quarters for signs of contamination. The code represented the formal codification of knowledge that had been developed through necessity in the lawless maritime communities of the previous century. The legacy of pirate responses to venereal disease extends to modern maritime medicine through the principle of disease containment in confined environments. The challenges faced by pirate crews in close quarters foreshadowed the problems that would confront modern naval vessels and even space missions. The protocols developed for isolating infected crew members, maintaining sanitation in limited spaces, and balancing treatment with operational effectiveness all have roots in the practical adaptations made by pirate communities. This historical continuum demonstrates how even the most marginalized maritime societies contributed valuable medical knowledge that continues to inform contemporary practices.